Good afternoon. It's the first day, the first keynote, and it's my first time at South by. So I'm really nervous and happy to be here at the same time. And after such a great introduction, by the way, yeah, I was named one of the most important 100 in the art world. I was number 98, just so you know. I think it's important to know. And I am so happy to be here in the Temple of Interactivity because this is where I live right now. I kind of left behind cute chairs and fast cars, the traditional icons of design. I mean, I'm still dealing with them sometimes, but I really love to live and work and curate in all the spaces in between, the spaces that you inhabit all the time as interaction designers and experts in interactivity, but it's something that needs to be taught as a comfortable space to the outside world. And that's why today I would like to talk to you about all the spaces in between art and design, between different types of design, between science and design, between technology and design, all the spaces that I believe will be the future not only of design but of humanity in general. I very often use this slide that was done by my two friends, Tony Dunn and Fiona Raby, because it shows the before and the after of design. Before and after what? Well, before and after us, our generation, our generations. It used to be that design was considered form follows function. Do you remember all the cliches and the stereotypes? Problem solving. It was all about giving us solutions to an issue at hand. But in truth, some of the best designers of today are those that are able to frame new questions and to frame new problems. They're the ones that look for all the ambiguity and the ambivalence between what is asked and what can happen. So if you look at this slide, there are many ways to go about it, but it goes from old design being affirmative, say the problem solving of the 1950s and 60s and Brown and all those types of product design, to today being critical. It used to be about problem solving, now it's about problem finding, and so on and so forth. This slide can give you endless delight for like hours and days and weeks. But right now, what I want to talk about is simply how we go from one column to the other, because it used to be quite binary, before and after. And right now, instead, what I'm looking for is this kind of space in between, is the transformation, is how designers and thinkers have gone from one kind of static and functionalistic view to instead a view that is really dynamic, and that is about the future as it can be. It's about multiverses, it's about entanglements, and not anymore about Euclidean geometry. So in a way, the best slide is this one. It's kind of a little bit from Fringe in a way, but it's this kind of in-between space that is about leapfrogging, about ambiguity, and that is the one that we are creating every day as we go. It's not the first time that I try to have this kind of painterly view of science. I'm a complete ignoramus. I'm trained in architecture. I don't know science, if not for the kind of atmospheric use that I make of it. My thesis at school in Milan at the Polytechnic was entitled Fractal Architecture. So I was looking at the work of these Viennese architects called Coop Himmelblau. So you see that drawing over there. It's a real building. It's on the top of a Viennese building. And I had this intuition that architecture had changed because it couldn't be anymore represented by sections and plans and axonometries as it was in the past, but rather it had to be taken in pictures, in segments. It had to be inhabited and felt because scale was indifferent and the little portion was a representation of the whole of it. Very funny, when I went to interview the architect, Wolf Prix in Vienna, and I told him what I thought, he looked at me like, what are you talking about? And nonetheless, I went on thinking and studying fractals by starting from an intuition about space. A few years later, I ended up meeting Benoit Mandelbrot, the father of fractal geometry. It was a big emotion. It was in the occasion of Seed magazine had organized this kind of dialogues that they would film. And here we are portrayed. I look like the Virgin Mary, and he looks like the Jedi, sensei. But, the dialogue was really a monologue. He did not want to talk about architecture. He did not want to talk about fractals. All he wanted to talk about was my nemesis, Picasso, modern art. And he didn't want to talk with me. He wanted to talk to me. But nonetheless, great, great giant of science, and he did so much for me. So now I went from fractal architecture to my obsession of today, which is quantum design. I believe that design is moving towards a quantum kind of culture. Do I know what quantum physics is? Not at all. But proceeding from this intuition, I'm trying to understand a little more. And quantum design is design that is about the spaces in between, that is about ambivalence and ambiguity. And this is the great work of some architects from Berlin that decided to expand the interior space on the outside by projecting people on these kind of trampolines and making the inside blur with the outside, and also the public and private dimensions also come together. Well, what is quantum design? Very, very hard to understand. Of course, it's about superposition that comes from the very famous theory that, the cat theory, the Schwendiker cat theory. It's hard to really explain it well, but that's why I kind of introduced Maru, the cat in the box, to kind of make it clearer. But to make a long story short, Schwendiger's cat is about the fact that different, and it's a thought experiments that proves that two realities can occur simultaneously. Let's not go into details today. I have a lot of notes here that I could read to you to explain better this quantum thought experiment. But what is important to us thinking about design today is this idea: realities can happen at the same time. And maybe a better way to show this particular idea is to show not Maru, the contemporary Japanese cat in the box, but rather this beautiful prints from the Hiraki Ukiyo collection. They're wood blocks from the Edo period, 1615 to the 19th century, and you can see they show many different realities of cats as people, therefore living in two different dimensions at the same time. I like to use the LOL cats that way. But even more interesting for us than the superposition theory is the theory that comes from quantum theory about entanglement. The fact that objects, even far away, are entangled, that realities can happen at the same time, and that particles interact in such a way that they are connected to each other, even if they live in different universes. I like to show as a very atmospheric idea this beautiful galaxy that is the beginning of Biophilia, the app by Björk. And Björk is your typical quantum designer artist. She lives in so many different dimensions, and she makes things happen at the same time. So she is an inspiration, she's a beginning and an end, and a bridge in between. Of course, I'm tooting the horn of Moma right now because there's a Björk retrospective, but the acquisition of the Biophilia app happened in 2011 when the app was presented to the world, because it was really an example of the power and the possibilities of design. And you know, entanglement also brought to my mind, because I was reading about it and I was trying to be really thoughtful about it, it brought to my mind also William Bell, you know, our beloved William Bell, and I wanted to say goodbye to him, rest in peace. I thought that with this audience, we could really say goodbye to William Bell and to everything that he's represented to us. But no matter what, ambivalence and ambiguity are dimensions that are very comfortable for us. And there are many designers that are living in this dimension. There are many designers that work in the interstitial, that are architects but work with urban planning, and they do performance architecture, that work with ambiguity, that manufacture and design objects that could be construed for evil purposes, even though they were completely conceived at the beginning for good purposes, that inspire leapfrogging. I'm thinking of, for instance, Juliana Rotich and Ushahidi in Kenya, that are meant to try and really push the leapfrogging of the so-called third world over the first world, and it's going to happen quite soon, and so on and so forth. Our habit and our ease with meta is something that many designers are really comfortable with, even though sometimes they deal with very material objects. And you know, here the idea of the quantum computer is something that really comes to mind. You know, the quantum computer is this object that is so elusive because it lives only at really amazingly low temperatures, and it lives in these states in between that are very hard for us to understand or perceive. And you know, Miranda Trimier, who is a great journalist, at some point wrote a great speculative essay about coming face to face with a quantum computer. It's really quite amazing because she even dated a scientist that was working near the quantum computer in order to get to the quantum computer until he kind of understood the plot and so dumped her. But she was really like a true investigative journalist. But what I find really amazing is that she got to really explain what the quantum computer is about. And I really think you should read her article if you want to know more. But from her words, something really popped out. The idea that a quantum computer expresses delicate quirks and unpredictability. She was investing the quantum computer with almost human features. The quantum computer was about the efficacy of ambivalence or ambiguity. And she was saying that ambivalence and ambiguity are smart collaborators that not only share their uncertainty, but sharpen it into a precise mode of communication. Have you noticed in your lives how much more you get if you show vulnerability? How much more you get when doubt is what animates your conversation, a kind of generative and positive doubt? I think that so many designers really move in that direction. And I'm showing you here the work of two different teams of designers dealing with robots. Up on top left, you see the work of Rob de Graaf, an old-fashioned robot like Rosie from the Jetsons is going to follow us, take care of us, and like a kind of a dumb lapdog, do anything that we ask of him and of it. And instead, at the bottom, Dan and Raby talk about robots that, on the other hand, are neurotic, needy. They're not going to do anything for us until we kind of cuddle them, look at them in the eyes. They are a type of robot that is unpredictable, but that could show us much more efficacy and usefulness than the old-fashioned one. What if? What's going to happen if science and design come together? It's nothing new. I'm telling you about a dimension of today, but it's a dimension that's existed forever. Because if you think about it, there was also Bucky Fuller. Bucky Fuller thinking of a new world, a brave new world of science and technology that was based on science, but at the same time animated by human vision and human needs. Or the great architects of the late 1960s and early 1970s. If you want to have a great sci-fi wanderlust tour, you can look at all these different images, whether they were in the UK or in Italy or in Japan. They were all thinking of a new world that was based on the metabolism of nature, not only of human beings, that was indifferent to scale and open to the way people grow and to the way nature breathes. I really love to look at past examples of the situation and the predicament we're in today, and sometimes they're dystopian, but not only utopian. Like the work of the great Ettore Sottsass that in the 1970s, at the time of the oil crisis and at the time of the first terrorist attacks, started talking about this gray furniture that cried and kind of wept and mourned with humans, even though they might have been rich and they might have been in the so-called developed world. Design that is sympathetic, design that grows with people, design that is sensitive to how much nature has been wounded. That's what I would like to study in the future. And there are designers already today that deal with these contrasts and try to bring them together. And I'm going to show you the work of a few of them that you might not be familiar with. Hella Jongerius is possibly one of the greatest designers alive. She lives in Berlin, and she works for great companies like Vitra, doing furniture and creating all of these new types of products. But she also is so good at putting together old and new, at taking broken ceramics from the Delft Museum and reassembling them using caoutchouc from Venezuela and from Mexico. She also does old-looking, traditional-looking vases that are made of polyurethane and therefore are soft. There's a surprise and an economy of thought and a wisdom in what she does that is just amazing. Similarly, she goes to Africa, and like hundreds of thousands of designers before her, she gets completely stunned and enraptured by the classic Sxsw stool, the three-legged stool with a really high back that is typical of some parts of Africa. But instead of mimicking it blindly, she transforms it using carbon fiber and using polyurethane into a foldable stool that is suitable for us, understanding deeply other cultures in order to produce something that is really part of our own culture today. You see that funny TV dinner or computer dinner is something that she did for me for an exhibition in 2011, no, sorry, 2001, only one. It was an exhibition about how people work. And at that time, I don't know if you remember, some of you might, everybody was freaking out about working at home, thinking that family life would be completely destroyed by the fact that technology was available in the domestic environment. And she was already at that time saying, hey, people are not stupid. They know what to do with their technology. So she did a series of objects, this was only one of them, that were about merging leisure, pleasure, family, work, all in the same technology, making it seamless in our life. So already she was ahead of her time, and already she was thinking that people cannot be dogmatic in thinking only about the future or only about the past. Forma Fantasma are two lovely Italian designers that live in the Netherlands, and they're almost her pupil. You know, they are her pupils also directly because they went to the Academy of Eindhoven that was really influenced by her. They are two contemporary designers that understand that we have a problem with our resources and also that there's a culture that is about making. So they go and dig into the material culture of the places all over the world to find new solutions for the future. What you see here, this beautiful series of vessels, is made using resins from the prehistory of polymers, so before the oil era. They are resins that are made of insect excrements, that are made of like beeswax, that are made of straw, and they are resins that they are teaching people how to use today. You see here them cooking these resins, and at some point there was a furniture fair in Milan and they were in the basement of this department store that was like Bloomingdale's, cooking these resins with fumes going everywhere and people around them, something not really wouldn't have happened here, but the idea is really to teach people how to make also their own resins. So it's about understanding from the past ways to go about the future. The work of Neri Oxman is also in between, wonderfully so. She is a quite outstanding architect, engineer, and artist. She's based at the MIT Media Lab, and she always incorporates nature in her work, not as something to imitate, not as an ideal, but rather as a tool for human beings to build and grow objects in a way that is more attuned to nature. So you see here the work that is also part of the MoMA collection. At this time, it was about building a catalog of algorithms that condense and distilled certain really smart behaviors in nature, like barks of trees or the surface of certain butterfly wings. And here is the new work that is installed in the museum collection right now, which is about understanding the way organs are built and reproducing certain patterns of building using 3D printing, very sophisticated 3D printing. So you see here the power of the desire to understand nature and the power of aesthetic talent merged together with a deep knowledge of making is what is shared by all these designers. And it's really important. It's about interaction. I'm sure many of you have seen already this 4D printed dress by Kinematics, which is a small company, nervous system, that is based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. They found a way to print objects that are of a certain volume in much smaller vats of 3D printers, therefore making the whole process much more economic and also much more thoughtful. Of course, then the system is based on the idea that you can scan and customize your own dress, which makes it even more desirable. But I think that the true amazing innovation is in the way things are built. And even in this case, it reminds me of traditional ivory filigree from India, for instance. So there is something very ancient in the newest advanced technologies. And there is something that is deeply organic in the way the most inorganic, perhaps, thought of our time, the computer, gets us closer to nature. It really makes me happy and it gives me joy to see so much of nature incorporated in the way architects build. These are Mycelium Bricks, and they were designed by The Living, which is an architectural company based in New York that now is part of Autodesk. It was based on technology developed by some engineers in Troy. They were looking for a substitute for polystyrene. Polystyrene is so extremely polluting, but by using leftovers of cornstalk together with mycelium from mushrooms, one can grow this kind of insulating material that is completely biodegradable. And one can also make architecture out of it, and can make shrouds to build corpses in, and can make furniture, and as you see here, can also make buildings. This was Moma PS1 last year, the Young Architects program, and it was all made with those bricks, which as the summer went by, it rained quite a bit last summer, beautifully aged, almost like a fast forward of a brick building of yesteryear. It's quite gorgeous to see the poetry that also comes with the way certain architects and artists are trying to push forward the way we build. Some architects are even doing performance architecture. I like this contamination amongst disciplines. You know, at Moma right now, we're trying to almost get rid of the idea of departments with some pretty funny results at times. But Alex Schrader, for instance, in this architectural performance, mimics the kind of negotiation that happens between two people in the domestic environment, and really talks about the fact that two people working in an enclosed environment are interdependent. This is a 5-day performance, and two people are using counterweights, and if one goes to the bathroom, the other one has to dangle a little farther down. So it's really interdependence, codependency, and almost like suffocating negotiation. It's a beautiful way to talk about the way we live, right? And it takes us closer to the way we build our apartments. Similarly, Cohen Van Balen, they're great, originally from the UK, at least, well, originally from elsewhere, but they studied in the UK, built that object that you see bottom right only to make it become a choreography of industrial production. So together with a choreographer from the Royal Ballet in London, they went to China, to Shenzhen, and they picked real factory workers, and together with them, they built a choreography of manufacturing that was only because of itself, and the object that came out of it is only a representation of this choreography, a form of design performance. We're really far from the old idea of design, aren't we? Just like we're very far from the old idea of architecture in the work of Philippe Dujardin, who is a photographer that makes extraordinary and fantastic buildings just by doing photomontage of modernist or traditional architecture. And you see, there's no understanding where these objects are positioned in the quantum entanglement of future design. They participate in science, as you can see in the strange building on the left-hand side that was covered with nanoparticles that were meant to neutralize pollutants in the air, but also it's about merging the farm, the city, the agricultural, the dimension of architecture and the dimension of living. And it's what is most exciting. When one looks at art, there are artists like Tomás Saraceno, who was trained as an architect and who always installs beautiful pieces that are about going back to Bucky Fuller almost, and trying to understand what science and architecture and design can do together to make art more useful to the world in an immediate way. A lot of the desire that animates all of these individuals is that of being more useful in the real world. Scientists already for a few years have tried to really show how they can get their hands dirty. They're not anymore lost on a cloud. They want to get involved. Artists don't want to be about self-expression. They want to give something back to people, like Olafur Eliasson, who brought these beautiful pieces of iceberg from Iceland into the main square in Copenhagen so that people could listen to them crack and disappear and have a sense through their position like a clock, like an ominous clock, have a sense of the amount of ice that melts every day because of global warming in the Northern Pole. So they really want to show what the world can be by pushing their own talent. Pierre Huyghe is an artist who always incorporates live beings in his art to show the connection between art and nature. And it's very funny because I had never realized that this is something that artists don't do very often, while instead designers do. Look here at the work of Susana Soares, who uses the olfactory capabilities of bees to train them to recognize certain enzymes that detect illness in the way people breathe, you know, illness or pregnancy. The space in between digital and physical is, of course, a space that we are all very familiar with. And here you see an object that I'm sure is very well known to all of you, which is the iWriter project. It's a way to use a technology by Graffiti Research Lab, which enables one to tag buildings using laser, and adapt it to a new kind of software, open source software, that enabled this graffiti artist from Los Angeles, Tempt1, to tag a building downtown even though he is paralyzed in bed in Los Angeles because of Lou Gehrig's disease. So it's even more than just the physical and the digital. It's the transportation of one's body. It's almost like an out-of-body experience that is enabled by design and by technology. And here is Graffiti Research Lab doing their work with laser tag outside of the hospital room. So the dimension in between is what is interesting today, tomorrow, and in the past. This is a slide that is a little old, as you can tell from some of the artifacts that are listed on it. It was used by Area Code, which is a design in the real world, a gaming design company in the real world that was then incorporated into Zynga and now kind of vanished. But it was beautiful because they were showing the space in between using the QR tag, which is so obsolete, it's not funny, but the space in between is the one that we want to be in. And we want to be in there not only as designers, but also as museum curators. This is a work by Area Code that I show all the time to talk about the space in between. It's very old, as you can tell from the clamshell phone. You know, it's really quite funny, but it's about following a video game on your phone while you are in the West Village, and that's the real map of the West Village, and you are your physical body, and there are two completely digital monsters that are trying to eat you, and you're running for your life, even though there's nothing that is going to eat you for real, but the feeling is real. And even though this is old, and even though this is something that we might not do anymore because we have better things to do with the merging of digital and physical, still it really brings us there. It really is about the way things will be. A little bit more of the digital archaeology, or the archaeology of the space in between, is this great SMS projector from Troika. It's so old, it's not funny. So you have this big gun that enables you to project SMS onto different parts of the urban environment. But this is, to me, one of the best metaphors of the way I would like design to act. I really love parkour. Can I do parkour? No, I can't. I mean, excuse me. But I wish I could, and I exhort everybody to think of design that way, to use what we have at our disposal in new ways, whether it's digital or physical or in between. I also like parkour among genders. There are some designers that are really good at building bridges amongst different entities that we didn't even know were separate in our minds. I'm showing you this particular project that gave me a lot of trouble, and I loved that it gave me so much trouble. It's by Sputniko. Sputniko is Hiromi Ozaki. She is British and Japanese, and she's also in Cambridge at the Media Lab right now. She used to be at the RCA, and she designed this menstruation machine. You know, every time she would start with an object, and then she would also build a whole reality around it. So the menstruation machine is a contraption to enable men to feel what it means to have a period, a full-fledged period. So you see there, there's this chastity belt. There are electrodes that give you cramps, you know, the lower abdomen. There's a reservoir, and you're supposed to draw your blood and put it in the reservoir, and then there's a cannula that delivers the blood between your legs, the whole thing. You have the pain, you have the discomfort, and then there's also the little video in which, you know, Takashi, who's a boy, but he's trying to feel what it means to be a girl, but we don't know if that doesn't have any sexual implications. It's just an attempt. So he's strutting around town with a girlfriend wearing the menstruation machine, and the girlfriend boyfriend is singing, it hurts, right? And it's going to hurt even more. It's like a little cute song. So the whole thing is absurd and at the same time really stunning. And the reactions it provoked when I showed it at Moma in 2011 was really extreme. Some people, like me, I chose it because I thought it was such a wonderful display of how design can build communication. Some people really loved it. Others were completely not turned off, outraged by it. And not the people that you would find predictable, you know what I'm saying? So it was really something that was visceral and not just cultural. So building bridges, sometimes by shock, sometimes by sweetness, is something that I'm really interested in. And some of the most interesting bridges are happening right now between biology and design. There are several panels that are happening here at South by Southwest that are about synthetic biology, biodesign, and the way this form of ultimate design, because it's the design of living entities, is actually coming to be. Broken nature is an idea for an exhibition that I've had for a long time, and maybe it'll happen, maybe not, who knows. But it's the idea that we have severed our relationship with nature. We've gone too far. And I do believe personally in the sixth extinction. I don't know if you're as optimistic as I am. It's going to take a while, but I believe in it. And I like how some designers and some scientists or thinkers like Stuart Brand are thinking of paying reparations to nature. I'm using that word thoughtfully. It's about really something that is a reparation for a situation that is unjust and unacceptable, that we have carried on too far. Now, Stuart Brand is thinking of the Revive and Restore project. He wants to actually revive whole species, including the passenger pigeon that was the most, the most frequent bird in the United States at the beginning of the 20th century and now is completely extinct. But there are other designers that are thinking of other spaces in between and that are thinking of speculative projects that are also about repairing our bond with nature. And these are some great designers that work all over the world. Daisy Ginsburg wrote a beautiful book called Synthetic Aesthetics, and she worked a lot also with the same Revital Cohen and Tour Van Balen that before did the object for the industrial manufacturing choreography. In this particular case, they worked on a machine in Japan to manufacture goldfish. So the idea is really for designers to move into the realm of the living, of building and designing living beings. But you cannot design living beings from the top down. You have to learn to grow objects, and that's one of the most beautiful achievements of design. And you can find it also in the digital realm. I want to show you a little bit of the work of Mary Oxman when it comes to the Silk Pavilion, and I'm going to show you in video. If I can have the sound up a little bit, please. The process is so beautiful. It's about learning how silkworms behave, studying them, distilling algorithms from the way they move, and then setting the conditions for these 40,000 gorgeous, fat, chalky, beautiful silkworms to build exactly what the designer wanted them to build. And you know, some designers and architects have understood that it's a mistake to completely subdue nature and reduce wilderness to civilizations. You know, it's to our detriment. It's better to make the two live together, a pleasant and really fruitful coexistence. And sometimes it goes a little bit into the realm of the absurd. It's about trying to understand from our own bodies how to move forward. This is the work of Christina Agapakis and Sxsw Tolas. Together, they developed human cheese. Cheese that is done using bacteria from armpits and mother's milk, also some milk from a cow. And of course, it is shocking as the Menstruation Machine, but it's about shocking people into a deeper understanding of what we're doing and of where things come from and where they go. It's really important for designers to have this function. And you know, I like to think of Moya Simone. I don't know how many of you look at this manga. Actually, it was suggested to me just a few days ago by Kevin Slavin. It's about this boy that is passionate about agriculture and that can see and talk to bacteria and other smaller entities. I find it so amazingly beautiful, and so many designers are really thinking about harnessing not only silkworms, algae, and mushrooms, but also bacteria as worker bees that are going to enable us to build a better future. It's really beautiful to see also how life becomes part of the speculative design. If you don't mind, I'm going to lower a little bit the music here because it's not as interesting as the one before. The music before came from the actual noise that the silkworms were making. In this case, instead, it's speculative, but it tries to think of a future where we will eat food that is alive or semi-living. Once again, kind of disgusting and wonderful at the same time. Food that is not alive because it never was. It was grown in vitro, and still it behaves with us as if it were still living. The realm of semi-living entities is something that designers have tackled for a while. I'm going to tell you this funny story from an exhibition at Moma. If you look at the object on the right-hand side, that's called Victimless Leather. And it's the work of Oron Katz and Yonat Zur and Guy Ben-Ari. They're based in Perth. They have this lab called Symbiotica, where they study semi-living entities. They were among the first to make a beef patty in vitro at the beginning of the 21st century. And for an exhibition that I did at Moma, they decided to grow this little small coat that's made of mice stem cells. And it was alive at Moma. You know, it was really very funny because that's what they do. They always have these semi-living entities. And at some point in the incubator, it was growing too fast. And they were back in Australia, so I sent them a picture and I asked them, what shall I do? And they told me, you have to stop it. And I asked them, what do you mean by stopping it? I said, well, you basically have to stop the nourishment. And so I said, do I have to kill the coat? And I said, yes, you do. I wouldn't put it that way because it was never alive, but I'm like, well, and to make a long story short, I really had a dilemma. And I could not sleep at night. Well, almost. I'm making it a little too dramatic. But it was really a deep dilemma. It made me think a lot. So this is a perfect example of what these designers are doing. Olafur with his iceberg in the square in Copenhagen, or Min Suk Cho with her food that was never alive but then moves, or Neri with her silkworms, and David Benjamin with his mushrooms. They're all making us think while they try to build things in a completely different way. We're at a point where we can actually design living beings, even viruses. You know, Autodesk just did this own virus in vitro. And of course, not to mention how much we can patent and copyright when it comes to living entities. So we're moving in that direction very rapidly. And the work of curators like me and of designers like you is to try and understand all the spaces in between. This is one of the latest acquisitions in the Moma collection. It's called Organs on Chip, and it's simulations of the way certain organs work, including some nanoparticles that actually are about reproducing also the chemical behavior, in order to speed up the test trials for new pharmaceuticals. So it's really amazing what's going on, and the collaboration between designers and scientists is based on dialogue and will be based on dialogue even more in the future. I believe that what curators can do is to push this dialogue further, and it's been happening for a while. I'm going to give you a little sense of Moma history here. This is an exhibition from 1934. It was called Machine Art, and it was one of the first instances in which design was shown naked. It was interiors of engines, it was coils, it was propeller blades, it was ball bearings that were shown on white pedestals against white walls as if they were Brancusi sculptures. People had never seen design that way. And it really was about creating almost the shock of the old, creating a distance so that people could understand better by the means of the exhibition. The exhibition continues being a means today, a means to an end. And you know, this year is going to be the 20th anniversary of the first exhibition that I did, and also of the beginning of the Moma website. This has not much to do with the lecture, but I wanted to brag because I'm here. I coded that thing. I started the Moma website, yes. I learned HTML and I made this monster that is still alive if you want to see it. But it was about the idea that materials are also a form of design. So slowly but surely, as curators, we try to show what was not seen before. This is the work of my great colleague, Leah Dickerman, who did the Inventing Abstraction exhibition. You know, there are canons in art history, like there are canons in pretty much every discipline, and one canon sees cubism and abstract art as a development of movements and isms. Nobody had ever done a social network representation of abstract art. And by using the sensitivity and sensibility of today and applying it to art history, Leah was able to show some connections that people had never thought about before, and almost jump-starting a brand new current in modern art history studies. So it's so wonderful to see what the in-between can have as a power. Also in this case, you can go and see all the connections between Picasso and Picabia, and sometimes the knots are some of the most mediocre artists. They might not have been great artists, but boy, were they connectors. And did they make things happen? They were enzymes. So what is more important when it comes to influence in our world, being a connector or being the great artist, being the great individual? I don't know, it doesn't matter, time will tell, but it's great to reveal these connections that were not revealed before. And you know, I just wanted to give you one last example amongst the bridge and the in-betweens. We started collecting video games at Moma about 2 years ago. You might have heard about it. And to you, it's a no-brainer. To me, it's a no-brainer. It's interaction design. It's one of the most visible and understandable form. But because it was in between, because it was a hybrid, because it was not completely understood by the people that were already visiting or that were already used to the Moma collection as it was almost like a shock. And that's because they have to be exposed to these new spaces in between. And even though digital fonts and video games are a way for us to think normally about design, it's something that we have to explain to the public at large. Because the future is about the ambivalence and ambiguity of all these different disciplines come together, like they come together, for instance, here at South by. And I truly hope that through our work and my work, even though we'll have to like maybe ruffle a few hairs and we'll have to irritate a few people, we'll continue to do it that way by creating bridges with other disciplines, by understanding in a deeper way and having a literacy of other disciplines, and bringing in the people that we need to make teams that are powerful and diverse and very well connected. So thank you very much.
We have a few minutes for some questions, and I hope you are all tweeting out your questions. I'm going to read them out, and hopefully we get some really good stuff coming in. Okay. First question.
I don't have a workout to talk about, so people don't ask me questions. There was Tim Ferriss before. He was getting all these questions about workouts.
Tell you what, if anybody has a question right here in the front, just raise your hand and I'll come down to you. It might be inelegant. Okay, watch this. I'm going to jump. Oh, man, that's really far.
Don't hurt yourself.
I did it. I should get something for that, right? Okay, here we go.
Thank you.
Hello, this was a fantastic talk.
Thank you.
I'm Connor from Symbiota. We make biohacking technology DNA tinker kits. And I'm wondering, have you ever personally done any biohacking or DNA tinkering?
No, aside from working on that, on the Victimless Leather, a little bit in the lab, not yet. But I would love to.
Okay.
I'm learning to code now, one thing at a time.
Okay, I hear we have a Q&A back on the screen.
Is there an ethical discourse? Oh, yes. There's a big ethical discourse when implicating living beings or animals in growing design, to the point that there's also the Office of the President that put together an ethical community to talk about this. So the field of biodesign and synthetic biology is very active when it comes to ethics. And there was just, I mean, you can find so much, but there was just a conference in New York called Biofabricate where a lot of this was addressed. But it's a big deal, and there's a big discussion that's going on.
Okay, next question.
What innovations and interested startups are happening for enhancing museum experiences? Very interestingly, there's many, many, many. I think that one of the biggest problems, though, is to understand exactly what kind of enhanced experience one wants. I mean, I don't believe that augmented reality is really the answer, and sometimes more information is not really how you improve people's experience. I think that remote visits could be an interesting way to go. I mean, one of the problems that museums have is that they can be either overcrowded if they are popular museums in locations that are also popular, or hard to reach if they are fantastic small museums in faraway places. So one of the most interesting technologies that I'm seeing for museum experience are the remote robots that go around and help people visit.
Okay, next question, and I can read this for you.
No, it's the same as before.
Oh, same question? Next question, please.
If you have it.
Okay. It's not moving?
Oh yeah, it is. No, it isn't.
Nope. Okay, I get one from the audience now. And I'm coming. Anybody raise your hand? I think we had somebody in front here. Who had a question over here?
I know who's asking this. Yeah. And then I'll come to it.
I'm just curious, a lot of the stuff you showed is really cool, but also seems very far off from actually being in the market. And there is, you know, there's obviously like an awareness of what we're doing to the planet, but it seems that the destruction is accelerating faster than these things are getting to market that are more bio-friendly.
I cannot hear you very well. I heard that you were asking about the market. So
I'm saying a lot of these technologies haven't made it to market or don't seem like they're making it to market very quickly, and at the same time we're all aware that the destruction of the planet for market products is accelerating at a rate that seems to outpace the availability or the marketability of these products. So how do you see that balance sort of correcting itself in the future?
It's very difficult because to make things really happen, you don't need only design, but you also need legislation, international agreements, you need economics. So I think that what you see here is a very small piece of a movement that still has to become established. So I agree with you, there's not enough of these products to market, but there's much more than before also because the market has changed and it's not necessary anymore to have economies of scale that enable you to penetrate and go everywhere. You can already bring something to market when it's, well, not a minimally viable product, but at least a little more development. But I think that the real change will happen when and if, depending on how optimistic you are, true legislative tools will happen across governments. And it's not going to happen very easily.
Okay, we've got a Twitter question here. You've been collecting
definitions of modern. With so many spaces in between, what is your best definition of modern today? Well, it's a definition that was given to me by a great painting and sculpture curator, and Kirk Varnado was his name, and he told me that in his mind, modern is everything that does not hide the process of its making. So there's a certain honesty and a transparency in the process. And it's a beautiful way of thinking about it because you see, it doesn't define modern as style or an artifact, but rather as a mental process that is about honesty and the willingness and the generosity to share the process with your audience. So it's very romantic, but I really like that definition.
We have another
if you weren't
question?
doing what you do, what would you be doing? Well, I started out wanting to be an astronaut, then it was astrophysics, then it was journalism. I sometimes say that I would love to work as a production designer in movies if I didn't do what I was doing.
Okay, next question. Do we have another question? Okay, here we go.
Quantum design changing the way Moma displays their art. The mix of various art in the same space can inspire new design thinking. Well, we are trying to revise completely the way we show the collection. Like, we have a new building that is going to go up, and so we're trying to rethink the normal chronological, typological display of the collection. It creates problems, and they're kind of quantum problems, they're entanglements. For instance, I can tell you that when you put design close to sculpture, it gets like, it's sucked in, and all of a sudden it's not design anymore, it becomes sculpture. It's very funny, you know. So design and sculpture next to each other don't really work. You need to find some kind of separation, and the separation could be in letting people use the design. You know, sometimes I think when you put a chair next to a sculpture, people should be able to sit on the chair. But definitely, we are working on it all the time, and we're trying to find new ways of displaying the art. Can you tell us more about the food of the future? So weird, so cool. Tell me when I have to stop.
Oh, no, you're good.
Well, the food of the future, you know, there are people that can tell you much, much more. But there's a beautiful project by Tony Dunn and Fiona Raby. They were the ones that were responsible for that slide that was blurred at the beginning. There's a beautiful project that is called Foragers that thinks that in the future we will run out of natural resources, so we'll have to go back to eating foods that we haven't eaten for centuries, like algae and seaweed and leaves and roots of trees. And so they designed this beautiful outsourced gastrointestinal system that one can wear to pre-digest and pre-eat all these different items. I don't know if we'll get there, but I think that the food of the future, as we see the food of today, will be a very interesting mix of traditional food and new ways not to make it more wasteful. I think one of the things that worries me the most is waste. You know, we waste an enormous amount of food. I don't know, there were some data that were published lately, and it's incredible to see that completely goes to waste. So I hope that more than the way we cook the food or the way we grow food, I hope that it's the way we use food and the way we buy food that is going to change. And that could change quite a bit with new system design, I hope at least.
And this, I think, is our last question, and it's a good one.
Can anything non-human be credited with making art? Oh, wow, what a big question. I would say definitely yes, but mostly because I don't know what art is. You know, so I think you can say that art is in the eye of the beholder. So one could say that nature makes art. What is art? Is it a tool or is it a means of self-expression? If you see it as a means of self-expression, then maybe not. But if you see it as instead as something that inspires you, a dog, a cat, or a cow, or a cloud, you know, everything can make art. But it's a really interesting question, one that will keep me awake, I think.
And so thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Christine.
It was lovely. A lot of people are very comfortable saying that machines can think. They can perform cognitive tasks. They can play chess. They can plan these elaborate plane routes and so forth. We're comfortable kind of using this word thinking with machines. But this emotive side, it's new, it's provocative, it's compelling, and it can also be controversial. So I thought I would spend some time